let's talk about not the Max. If only there was a way to cover that. Oh, here we go. Let's talk about buses. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about improving bus quality. And while that probably sounds a bit vague, it's kind of meant to be vague. Bus quality will be the quality of the service in general. I have a lot of points to bring up, and I didn't really write a complete schedule for this, so this might get kind of rambly. Firstly, articulated buses. Trimet, and really just Portland as a region, has fairly high transit use for a city of our size. Trimet has the numbers somewhere, but we're something like 16th highest ridership in the US. We're the 16th highest ridership transit agency. So it would seem very much logical to have lots of articulated buses in the fleet to keep up with some of these busy routes. Except that we don't. We don't have articulated buses. I mean, sure, we have the FX buses, but that's a BRT line. Every BRT line has articulated buses. That's the only line with articulated buses. Trimet seems to kind of be dragging their heels when it comes to this sort of thing. And that's bizarre to me. Most of the 80s decade, all the way until 1999, Trimet had articulated buses in the fleet. And ridership hasn't just suddenly dropped since 1999. No, it's done much the opposite. Cities like Hillsborough have grown rapidly over the last 2 decades, and we offer 0 60-foot buses on our routes. And there are crowded routes. You should never be standing on a bus. Now, of course, that would involve rebuilding garages to be able to more efficiently store 60-foot buses, but that shouldn't be too terribly difficult, as places all around the world and all around the US have easily been able to do things like this. And also, transit centers would have to be slightly redesigned. A lot of them have a design where they have bus bays, and each of the bus bays is a little cutout in the concrete curb that's pretty much designed to hold a 40-foot bus, and that's it. And major transit centers, such as Beaverton Transit Center, are designed like that, where they have lots of little cutouts and notches where the bus bays are, and you can fit one 40-foot bus in there. You can't fit a 60-foot bus. You can redesign them so that you can fit 60-foot buses there by literally just creating a curb and just allowing buses to park at it. That solves that. So yes, the whole, we need to introduce articulated buses in the fleet is a bit of a bigger issue than maybe you might have thought, but it is absolutely possible, and I would argue necessary. Like, 2 decades ago it was yesterday. 2 decades ago it was yesterday. Why did Trimet not replace them with New Flyer D60 LF like Seattle did? Next thing, fuel. I really think we should definitely be going hybrid or better. Hybrid electric or cleaner. So I'm not the biggest fan of natural gas power for buses. I would much rather see battery electric or hybrid electric for the future. In fact, and I might do a separate video on this, I have no idea why Trimet ordered diesel Nova buses for Division Transit Project. Novabus makes hybrid buses, and if you look at the contract that was sent off, the hybrid buses and diesel buses scored very similarly in their tests. I think the only reason Trimet went with diesel is because it was a little cheaper. Although, in my argument, I would rather spend that little extra money and do something that's better for the atmosphere instead of buying 31 fully diesel buses for a line like this. They were originally going to order battery electric buses, but because of the uncertainty of lots of other factors, they decided to settle on hybrid electric or diesel. And for some reason fell all the way back on diesel. I really don't understand that. The contract for Novabus required that they build the 31 Novabuses for the FX line that opened back in September. But the contract has an option for up to 159 total buses, which means, yeah, that's a lot of buses. But in the contract, Trimet can change the fuel type from diesel to diesel-electric hybrid. So do that. And while we're talking about cleaner energy buses, layover bays. At transit centers, maybe not at transit centers, just layover bays in general should be getting electric bus chargers, overhead electric bus chargers installed at them. That way we can choose, oh, this bus is going to go on the 57 today, and when it gets to Forest Grove, it'll charge with a little charger at the end. Even though it's not a transit center in Forest Grove. Okay, I think it technically is called Forest Grove Transit Center, but Trimet doesn't call it that. We're going to install a bus charger there, because buses end there. The 57 parks there for quite a while. It'll recharge. And then we'll install some at PCC Rock Creek. And then we'll put some up at the Foster Road layover. These are not transit centers. Oh, well, we'll put more up at Sunset Transit Center or at the drop-off bays at Beaverton Transit Center or whatever. That way, when you're taking buses out of your garage that are electric, you can say, oh, well, we have the chargers for this route. Let's send them out on the 52 today. Oh, actually, no, we'll send this one out on the 57 today. And we'll send this one out on the 73 today. Whatever. It should be easily possible to do that. Moral of the story, just install electric chargers everywhere so that buses can actually recharge anywhere. I've done a video on this, but introduce or reintroduce or reintroduce 24-hour bus service. It's almost like people have graveyard shifts or something and would like to be able to get home on a busier highway or road. And right now that's not currently possible because Trimet doesn't offer overnight bus services. And we are a region with 2 million people and there's not one overnight bus service. Even though Seattle does have quite a few overnight bus services and they only have a little bit more people than Portland. Also, overnight max, if possible. I know there's the whole restriction of, oh, all the trains have to be back in the garage at 2 a.m. I think that policy or whatever might have to change. Or you could maybe work around it by having the last train come into the yard at 2 o'clock and then the first one of the morning leaves at 2:10 or something. So that, yeah, all the trains are back in the yard at 2 o'clock. Even if it's only for 10 minutes, at least providing that little bit of overnight service so that you can still run trains overnight. That seems like a big deal, and other places are able to do it with subways, not usually light rail, but the MAX has high enough ridership to where I think that would be justified. At least, at a bare minimum, at least providing overnight trips to the airport, from Gateway to the airport, at a bare minimum. Blue Line is a busier line, and so maybe on the Friday night schedule and the Saturday night schedule, and into the next morning of both mornings, at least offering extra Blue Line trains for a stretch of both nights, I think at a bare minimum, We need something. A lot of people rely on it to get to or from work or downtown if they're drinking or whatever. And allowing that, oh, well, after I have 5 beers, I'm just going to go hop on the Mac so I can get home safely and not have to risk driving my car back home. Having that extra option available is a big deal. Alright, now this I've talked about a million times before, but let's make it 1,000,001. Frequency tiers. Yeah, I'm talking about tiers again, and no, I'm not crying. Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So Tier 1 would be basic frequent service. 15-minute frequency on bus lines. These would be 40-foot buses, maybe 60-foot if they start to get really busy. There really wouldn't be a need to run these 24 hours a day or anything, so Tier 1. And these are the lines that I would put Tier 1 on for now. And notice most of those frequent service lines that are on there are not ones that are frequent service right now. All the ones that are currently a part of frequent service today would move up to Tier 2. And so Tier 2 would be, in general, buses every 12 minutes. But it might vary a little bit depending on traffic conditions or whatever, so we'll say every 10 to 12 minutes. That's Tier 2, which would be these lines. And these probably look a bit more familiar because a lot of them are on today's frequent service network. And Tier 3 is just simply FX service, which Frequent Express, it's in the name, and yet it runs 3 minutes more frequently than standard frequent service lines. So this would be bumped up to every 10 minutes or better every single day. And this would be for all current and future FX lines. Ideally, during the rush hours, or at least during the busiest parts of the day, frequency would double, so possibly buses every 5 minutes, or even more frequently if you're doing very, very, very busy lines, such as 82nd Avenue. And while we're on the topic of talking about BRT lines, let's talk about BRT lines. What other lines should we build? Well, I've kind of talked about it before, but for sure, the 57 on TV Highway and the 72 on 82nd Avenue. These need it bad. But there are some other lines to consider as well. The 20 on Burnside, although in my streetcar future video, I have talked about constructing a streetcar through downtown Portland that would go on Burnside Street. That would be one of the lines. And so maybe it would be better to hold off on this one for a bit. Also the 33 on McLaughlin Road. While yes, I do think it might make sense, the Max Orange line already uses a corridor that's basically right by McLaughlin Boulevard. So I don't know how needed this is. Yeah. And also another big maybe would be the 35. And the reason I even mention the 35, I'm only talking about the portion on 35 that goes from downtown to Lake Oswego and then over to Oregon City on Macadam Avenue. I don't think this route is really all that busy, but it's not like it doesn't get used at all. But the main reason why I've even lumped it into this whole FX thing is for the simple fact that there was a Portland streetcar line being planned that would have gone from Portland to Lake Oswego. And it would have been high capacity. They were going to build a parking garage in Lake Oswego, and there was going to be development, and it was a lot. And it just kind of sounded like a light rail project that was going to use streetcar vehicles. So if we carry that over into an idea that at least makes a little bit more sense to me, that would be turn it into a BRT line. I imagine that would be a lot cheaper. But I really just don't see the ridership high enough to where that would really be needed. And there aren't really a whole lot of traffic lights or traffic congestion on Macadam, so this one would also definitely be placed on the back burner. This might seem surprising. If you've watched a lot of my videos before, though, I have talked about it. A new bus garage. No, not one at Columbia Boulevard, although yes, I absolutely do think that we do need a new bus garage on Columbia Boulevard, as that bus site held all of the 60-foot Nova buses after they got delivered. It has lots of space for that sort of thing. But what I'm talking about here is something I've mentioned before, and that Trimet really doesn't serve the west side all that well. It serves Beaverton fine. There's nothing wrong with the transit service in Beaverton. But Hillsboro and Aloha, yeah, it's not all that great. Actually, Aloha isn't terrible, but Hillsboro, with 108,000 people, only gets 4 bus lines, and only 2 of which run 7 days a week, and only 1 of which is frequent. So if Trimet were to instead invest in a 5th bus garage, that's right, after Columbia opens, get a new one out in Hillsboro, that would make life a lot easier, and it would be a lot easier to expand bus routes in Hillsboro. That way, if you had FX bus service on TV Highway, you could store some of them here, and you could design this garage with electric chargers from day one, and to be able to store 60-foot buses from day one, and possibly add hydrogen refueling from day one if you wanted to test that out. You could do whatever you wanted if you're building a garage from scratch. There are still some plots of land that you could possibly buy and turn into the bus garage, or you could look for other additional properties that are either abandoned or are for sale, where you could build this. Ideally, it would be kind of in the North Hillsboro area, maybe near Cornell, Cornelius Pass, that general area, even though that is quite dense in many areas of just industrial stuff. Hopefully you can find something. I want to talk about traffic signal priority. Now, as far as buses go, yes, it would be really nice if some of the busiest frequent service routes got the same sort of traffic signal priority that FX has. However, that would mean that FX wouldn't be as enhanced as it is nowadays. I would really like to see traffic signal priority used for the bus lines, but I'm not gonna hold my hopes very high for that sort of thing. I would imagine the traffic signal priority, the advanced traffic signal priority that is for use on FX2, will be used for future FX projects, and that's probably it. Even though, yes, it would be nice to implement that now, it might not make sense to until the bus-only lanes and other signals are in use, and until we just know for sure that this is going to be a BRT line. So, yeah. However, I will say, I do think the traffic signal priority for streetcars should be a bit bigger than just, oh, it'll change the signal if the streetcar's going to turn from one street onto another, or to get into the yard, or whatever. Everywhere else, it just seems like you're waiting and waiting. It seems like when you ride the streetcar across town, you spend at least 40 to 50% of the time stopped, waiting for the light to change, and you spend the other 50% of the time actually moving. It almost seems worse than a bus. So if we could get actual traffic signal priority, or heck, even the whole timed signals thing, like what's in use on MLK, that is where things start to get a bit better. One traffic signal will change green, and by the time you get to the next one, it will change green. And the traffic lights always do that. And so the streetcar can get up to speed and not have to stop at every light. So as far as traffic signal priority goes, I would say update the max on Yamhill and Morrison Street, because the traffic signal priority there is horrible, and again, you end up going like 2 miles an hour on the max, because the signals are not timed very well. Add traffic signal priority to many areas of the streetcar to help speed it up and help make it so that you're actually moving more. And number 3, as far as bus traffic signal priority goes, while I think it's awesome, and FX has made a dramatic improvement on how fast it feels like you go down Division, thanks to the fact that all the traffic lights are already green by the time the bus gets there, I think that should probably just best be reserved for FX use. If you want to see a lot of traffic signal priority for buses, you're gonna probably want to build a lot of BRT lines, which I'm not exactly opposed to, as long as it would make more sense to build it as a BRT line versus a streetcar line. This next point is something I've brought up before, but I'm starting to kind of lose faith in because I realize how it may not make sense nowadays. But I'll mention it anyways. Electric trolley buses. Considering the electric trolley buses. Portland does have hilly roads and hilly routes, and trolley buses are absolutely perfect for that, as I've demonstrated before by filming Seattle's trolley buses. And you wonder why San Francisco has held on to trolley buses for as long as they have. They do have excellent hill climbing ability. But right now, starting an electric trolley bus system from scratch may not make much sense. That's a lot of new infrastructure that you're going to have to add, maintain, figure out how you're going to power it, figure out what you're going to do if the power substations go out, how to create the junctions and where the wires should go. That's kind of a lot. It may be worth just getting battery electric buses and hoping that the technology will improve over time, which it not only has, it will continue to do. And if you think the 150-mile range is impressive on buses now, come back in, heck, 5 years to this video, or to just any electric bus article, and see what improvements we've made. You might be surprised how fast technology moves forward. So now let's talk about Trimet's fleet size. As far as the buses go, Trimet has a fleet of about 700. We have about 700 buses. And this has increased, but I think it would be worthwhile to increase it more, so that we have a lot more buses able to be used, which again would go along with the construction of the Columbia bus site in Northeast Portland, and my idea for the Hillsboro bus garage, and that would be to increase the fleet size to about 1,000. That means adding an extra 300 buses that could be used on the system, whether it's to create lots of new routes so that we have excellent coverage, which I think we already have pretty good coverage in many areas, as long as you live in Northeast or Southeast Portland, I suppose. But I think importantly, with those extra buses, you could add lots of higher frequency to the busy routes. It might allow you to run FX buses on Division every 10 minutes all day long and overnight, or to run buses on TV Highway every 8 minutes, or on 82nd Avenue every 6 minutes. You could go crazy with the frequency. Seattle, I am not kidding, you can look this up yourself with the rapid ride schedules. Seattle has multiple rapid ride routes that run every 4 minutes during busy parts of the day. The buses are 4 minutes apart. I am not making that up. You can look at the rapid ride schedules. Look at Rapid Ride C line. It runs every 4 minutes during busy weekday rush. This is Seattle. Population is fairly similar to Portland's. It is higher, but it's not that much higher. I think we can do that. We just have to get the proper amount of operations funding, which I know is a lot easier said than done, and that's a whole mess of its own. And going along with increased service, this is going to be my final point I bring up, and it is going to be to have a redesigned North Terminal, which, for those who don't know, is an area by Union Station where Trimet puts quite a few bus routes that end in downtown. They'll park in there at North Terminal, and the operators will have a break, and the buses will begin there. It's not a public stop, it's not a transit center, but it kind of looks like a transit center. It's just a place where the buses lay over. And right now, it's not really all that big, and there's not a whole lot of room there. So if you're going to start adding 60-foot buses to the fleet, or if you're going to start running buses very frequently, or introducing lots of new routes, you're going to need a much larger space to store those buses. I'm going to make a separate dedicated video on this topic later. It's probably going to be quite a ways further down the road, but look for that in probably a couple months' time. Well, that appears to be it. Those are all of my ideas to increase bus quality. As you see, yeah, just bus quality is just kind of the service, the quality of the bus service, and of what Trimet offers, and sort of a place where we could be. It's very vague, and it's up to everybody's opinions to see exactly where we should be going moving forward, but this is my take on it. And with that, I guess I'll see you on the next video.